Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, That Model Railway Guy, and welcome to another episode of Model Railway Basics. This one, I'll admit, is a bit of an odd one. It's not something that's strictly necessary for building a layout, but it's something that always confused me when I was just getting started, so that's why I decided to include it in this series. The topic in question is fascias, and if you have no idea what that is, well, essentially it's just a piece of wood or something similar that goes along the side of your baseboard to protect the scenery and give you a nice, neat finish at the edge. The idea is simple, but the thing that always confused me was how to go about actually making one. And so, since I hadn't seen any tutorials online about this already, I figured I'd show you how I do it. Now, as always, I'm sure there are lots of different ways you can go about this, but the technique I use is very much something I figured out on my own, but hopefully it'll be of use to you if you decide to add one of these to your own layout. So, with that said, how exactly do you go about building a fascia? Well, to begin with, I like to start work on this when I've got the landscaping in a rough shape. Here you can see I've got the main body of the hills in place, but I haven't added any of the scenics yet. Now here I've got some offcuts of thin wood, and I'll press that up to the side of the baseboard, and then using a felt tip pen I draw a line following the rough contours of the landscape. And then I'll just repeat the same process for the other sides. You don't have to be too exact here, so feel free to smooth out some of the harsher drops if you want. In fact, as the polystyrene I used for my hills is quite flat, I'm deliberately drawing my own contours in some places so that I can get a more natural line, and I'll show you how to build up to this later. You can also use this process on hills made in different ways too. For example, some of the larger hills on my layout were made using chicken wire, and it was the same process of tracing out the contour of the land just with a bigger piece of wood. Now, as my layout is modular and this is the very end piece, it has hills on 3 sides. If you're building a more traditional layout though, you'll probably have a back scene on one side, so you only need to worry about making a fascia for the front. And now with the contours drawn on each piece, let's head outside to cut them. As you can see, I'm using a jigsaw here to make this a nice and quick process. As for the type of wood to use, it really could be anything. I'm actually using some strips I cut out of the back of an old IKEA wardrobe, but if you don't have one of those going spare, you could just use good old plywood instead. The main thing is for it to be thin, as you don't want to add any extra weight to the layout, and this is just a finishing piece really, rather than being structural. With the fascias now cut, let's head back inside to stick them in place. With the baseboard on its side, I just run a length of PVA all along the frame, and then spread this around with a brush. Once you're happy, get the corresponding side piece, line it up and press it down into the glue. When it's in the correct position, it's worth having a few clamps on standby to hold it firmly in place. And then this is probably overkill, but I like to hammer in a few tacks as well just to be safe. Putting the tacks in also allows me to remove the clamps quicker, which means I can get to work on attaching the next piece right away. Now you'll notice I've deliberately left a bit of an overhang at the corner here, and that's because I want the next piece to butt up against it, as you can see here, to create a nice neat join. It's not a big deal if you forget to do this, you'll just have a bit of a gap at the corner, but you can always patch that up with some filler if it really bothers you. With all the sides now attached, you can see we have the fascia pretty much complete, but it doesn't quite match up to the landscape perfectly. In some areas there are gaps or height differences, but in most cases you can solve this by draping a strip of plaster bandage over the gaps and leaving it to set. If you haven't already, you'll want to check out the previous episode where I went into more detail about using plaster bandage. You can also finish it up nicely with a little bit of modelling compound. Remember how earlier I drew my own contours in some places? Well, this is a great way to build your land up naturally to meet the height of your fascia. You don't really need that much, just a little bit here and there to smooth it out in some places and fill in any gaps, but between this and the plaster bandage you'll get a nice neat looking edge. And that's pretty much it. You can paint them if you want or just leave them as they are, but the main thing is that they protect the sides of your scenery and give you a nice finish to the edge of your layout. So I hope you found this tutorial useful, and if you haven't already, please do subscribe and hit the bell icon to get notifications. In the meantime though, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you soon for the next episode of Model Railway Basics. Bye!